Christmas is the Leafs to win the cup. I've been here since '67. Now we need a little luck. I'm begging you, Lord Stanley. I ain't asking for a lot. All I want for Christmas is the Leafs to win. For Christmas is the Leafs to win. For Christmas is the Leafs to win the cup. The Leafs, the Red Cup. Lord Stanley's Cup. The Leafs go.
All right. All I want for Christmas is the Leafs to win the cup. That's Helix. And waiting in the wings, we've got the front man. Yes, the guy who kind of started it all with a bunch of friends way back in the day. But we're going to go back even further than that because we're going to start with Brian's journey through the world of music to Helix and beyond. So without further ado, I'm going to invite Brian on the screen. Brian Vollmer of Helix.
How you doing out there, Ken?
I'm doing fine, buddy. Hang on a second. We'll split the screen. There we go. You're down in warm Florida.
I am.
Nice and warm there today?
It was nice and warm here today.
Nice.
And one of the reasons I like it is because for the first part of my life, I froze. Everywhere I was, I froze.
Oh, man.
So now that I'm older, I don't want to freeze anymore.
Yeah. Nice to get down there and get away from the cold weather. Hey, buddy?
Well, it's not just cold weather up in Canada. When I was young, I lived on a farm and I slept with my two brothers in one bed. We were very poor. And the temperature was so low in the bedroom that we had 5 of my grandmother's quilts made with snot rags piled on top of us. And my mom would read us stories before we went to bed, and we'd all like cling to her to get some body heat. And when we woke up in the morning, we could actually draw pictures with our fingernails on the frost on the inside of the windows.
Oh, wow. Single pane windows.
Yeah, it was very cold, and we only had an old oil furnace downstairs. In fact, one more we used to fight over the registers, and I was the oldest, so I got to sit on the register closest to the furnace. But I used to go in the kitchen in the morning. My mom and dad be eating breakfast, and I had this ritual of rubbing my ass up against the warm oven door in the oven. And one morning I was doing that, and my cotton shirt caught on fire. And before my parents even got up out of the table, it burnt right off my back. And at that time, there was no OHIP, there was no, like public medical insurance. So my dad put butter on it and sent me to bed. And he said, "Listen, if it gets really bad, if it hurts really bad, I'll take you to the doctor," which really meant I ain't taking you to the doctor because my dad had no money to take me to the doctor. And so I woke up about a day and a half later. I remember crying myself to sleep thinking, how bad do I have to be before they take me to the doctor?
Wow.
But I missed a week off school, so I thought that was a good trade-off at the time. And then later when I got in a band, it was cold cars, cold buses especially, always freezing cold. I used to wake up even when we did live in Edmonton, I remember waking up that morning in the bunk of the bus and seeing my breath in my bunk. So
wow, that would have been a cold show.
It was a cold show. It was like 30 below zero outside in Edmonton.
Oh, man.
So that's why I love Florida. I love the heat. I love the sun. That's
No
another
doubt.
thing I can't stand is, it gets pretty dark early in the afternoon in Canada. I think like you got like this much time between when the sun comes up and goes down.
About 8 hours of sunlight this time of year, so that's not so good for people.
Yeah, so I used to get depressed in the spring. What do they call that? But
Seasonal affective disorder. Some people call it that.
well, whatever it was, it sucked. So I went to so my wife and I live in Florida now in the
Wow.
winter anyway.
In the winter. And
Mm.
so we were talking a little bit about growing up in a farmhouse. You were up in the Palmerston area, right? Palmerston,
Listowel, actually.
Listowel.
Listowel area, and I first got into music actually at school. In grade 3, I had a teacher named Inez Haid, and she used to get us to sing, and we used to have to go over to mass and sing in the morning. I was an altar boy, believe it or not. Do I look like an altar boy? And one day we were singing, and Inez Haid came over and says, "You have a very masculine voice," which I took to mean a very good voice because I didn't know what masculine meant. And my love for music was born. But I used to hear my grandfather come up and he always be playing his country and western records. Patsy Cline, Ernest Tubb, Jimmy Reeves, Johnny Cash. My favorite was Johnny Cash, and Top of the Pops from England. And that's kind of when I started to get into music and singing. And also at our church was every summer we'd have a garden party. I remember some of the kids that went to school at the Creamers, they had this family band. And I found out they were getting paid to play at the garden party, big gig. And so I went to the priest to ask him if I could sing, and he says, "No, I don't think so." But because I just didn't know any better.
And you could
And,
have told him that you had a good manly voice.
and then in high school, I had Jerry Fagan for a choir conductor. I got into music because it was a necessary class you had to take with some of the other classes I was taking. And Jerry Fagan ended up becoming the conductor of the Fanshawe Singers down in London, quite a famous guy. And Jerry got me in grade 13 to try out for the Ontario Youth Choir. And about 500 kids across the province auditioned, and they picked about 60 kids. And I
Wow.
got picked. And we actually opened up Hamilton Place with Galt McDermott and Salome Bay from, Salome Bay was known as, I believe, Canada's grandmother of the blues or something like that.
Right.
And Al Nicholson and Nell Carter were in Jesus Christ Superstar. We had Galt McDermott, the guy that wrote Hair, as a conductor, and who else? Aretha Franklin's rhythm section played with the choir, and we opened up Hamilton Place.
Wow. That's quite a history going back to like 8 years of age, the first time you're introduced to music at all.
Yeah, I was pretty young. I didn't have many friends when I was a kid because we lived on a farm, and so being a loner, and there wasn't any TV back then, I used to listen to my parents' record player with my grandfather's records, and you'd put like 4 quarters on the arm of the record player, and hopefully it would stick in the groove. And
Right.
even back then, I jumped from the railing on the staircase to the couch and bounce around, pretend I was a singer, and I'd sing along.
So you're bouncing around even back in those days when you were a kid.
Yeah, I even remember the first song I ever learned, and it was "The Cat Came Back." I still know all the verses and lyrics.
And who wrote that song?
I have no idea. I think it's a traditional American folk song.
Okay. Cool.
But I was a big Johnny Cash fan, and I still am a big Johnny Cash fan. I think I've got 22 of his albums.
Right. And Johnny Cash was like, he was big in the country world, man. And he crossed over into the rock world a bit too.
Well, Johnny Cash was managed by Saul Holliff, who was based in London, Ontario. A lot of people don't know that. And Johnny Cash actually proposed to June Carter at London Gardens. The reason Johnny Cash was managed by a Jewish guy from London, Ontario, is because at the time Johnny Cash couldn't get a gig because of his drug and alcohol problems. He either wouldn't show up for the gig or he'd show up for a couple songs and then walk off stage. So nobody'd hire him. So he came up to Saul Holliff, and Saul Holliff was a promoter in Ontario just before the bar scene started to take off across Canada. And
Okay.
Johnny Cash came to Saul Holliff, and Saul Holliff said, I'll manage you on three conditions. First off, you quit the boozing. Secondly, you get a decent woman. And Johnny Cash was already married. And thirdly, I'm not moving. If you want a manager, I'm managing you from London, Ontario. So Johnny Cash agreed to those three conditions, and Saul Holliff turned around Johnny Cash's career.
Wow. What a
Tom,
great story.
Tom Wojciechowski, I hope I'm pronouncing that right, was in the group Mackenzie and a bunch of other bands, and he was in, I think it was Cambridge. I can't remember the name of the hotel. I got it written down here somewhere one night. And he wasn't feeling well, so he asked if he'd get off early. There wasn't many people in the bar. And this drunk come over and wanted him to meet someone. And Tom knew he was the kind of person that wasn't going to give up, so he allowed himself to get dragged over to this table. And this guy goes, I'd like you to meet Johnny Cash. And sure enough, there was Johnny Cash. And Johnny Cash said to Tom, he says, I really like your stuff. I'd like to get up and play a few songs if that's all right with you. And Tom says, knock yourself out. So Johnny Cash goes, can I borrow your guitar? And Tom says, no. And so Johnny Cash had to get one of his road crew guys to run out to the bus and grab his guitar. And the next day, the headlines in the KW Record were that Johnny Cash had failed to show for his gig at the auditorium, and they had found him drunk behind, I think it was a Scott's Hotel or something like that it was called.
Right.
It's not there anymore. It was in Preston.
Oh, you know what, Brian? We've got an internet problem going on here. I see 8 people online watching us right now currently, but the number keeps flipping up and down, and our audio keeps jumping in and out, and I'm getting a report that we've got some sort of internet glitch going on here.
Mm-hmm.
So let me just check really, really quick and see what's going on. They're telling me our internet's out. Let me just see. Donnie is online. He says the last time I saw Brian was a few years back when Helix opened for Alice Cooper at the Cleary Auditorium.
Uh-huh. Where's the Cleary Auditorium?
I don't know. Do you know where it is?
No, I don't.
Okay, nobody's saying they're seeing anything funny on the internet here, so I'm going to tell them not to touch anything. They want to reset the modem. I'm like, no, don't reset that.
Is it on my end or your end?
No, I think it's on my end. My internet feed here is on a separate hub that comes off my house cable, but for some reason it's acting strange. But Brent's watching this. He says the audio's fine, so we'll just keep going. What about the video? Is the video good? Can you guys comment in there? Cleary Auditorium, Donnie. Where's the Cleary Auditorium? The Cleary Auditorium. We need a clarification on that one. In the meantime, I'm going to take a quick boo at it. Anyways, you're talking about these chance meetings with Johnny Cash and how Johnny Cash got managed from a guy from London, Ontario, of all places.
Yes, and then Saul went and introduced Johnny Cash to June Carter, who's a member of the Carter sisters, and proposed to June Carter at the London Gardens. In fact, my personal photographer, Victor Sees, his dad took the pictures that night.
Yeah, this is why I love having these conversations with you, because you always have all these cool stories along the way.
Well, I believe when you're in the music industry for a long time, you meet so many people and you get a story probably about everybody you meet. And there's also that 7 degrees of Kevin Bacon, you know?
That's true. That too. Those 2 or 3 degrees of separation, especially in Canada.
Yeah.
Um, so you y- so when was that in your timeline, Brian? How old were you when that was going on?
Oh, well, in my book that I'm writing, The Golden Age of the Canadian Bar Circuit, my book starts off in the period between 1965 and 1975. That was when the bar scene really started to take off in Canada. And 75 was when I got into it. So when I'm writing the book, 75 is kind of where I start telling my own story. Um, but before 1975, around 1965, bands played one-nighters. They played high schools, universities, colleges, dance halls, roller rinks, and then that all changed as it got closer to 1970. And by the time we started in 75, we were doing a combination of both. We were kind of caught in that transition. And we'd start off, say, do a front end Monday to Thursday at a club, like, and then we'd play the weekend at a high school, say, or a university. That was quite common at the beginning of the band. And then eventually we just played straight weeks in bars. And I didn't even realize that one nighters were fading into existence from existence. But, now that I'm doing the book, I'm kind of realizing that when we, around, I'd say 19, probably 85, they were gone for good.
Wow, wow. So that how old would you be at that time in 1975? How old would you have been then?
Geez, I don't know. I'm 67 now. So what is that? Do the math. Come on.
Well, let me see. Let me think. You're 4 years older than me, so
25, so 52 years ago, right?
let
No,
me.
57
You
years
said
ago.
1975. So 1975, you'd have been about 19 years old.
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, I was
So
wearing the Sniper's Meats when I first got into the band.
so you're just a young
I got out of
whippersnapper.
high school and I did my little summer stint in the Ontario Youth Choir. And then my dad said, "Are you going to go to university?" I said, "No." He says, "Then get the fuck out." Because he said, "I raised you. That was enough." And, I didn't feel any animosity or I wasn't mad at my dad for saying that. I thought now's the time to leave. So I moved actually to Kitchener. I started working at Snyder's Meats. I lived with my grandmother. My grandfather used to work at Snyder's Meats, and he got me a job there initially for the summer, this a couple of years before. And my grandfather passed away by the time I started working there part time. But I worked at Snyder's, I think, for maybe a year and a half, and
And all this
I
time you're doing music? Are you doing music during this time?
well, I had met the guys that were to form the original Helix. Actually, it was called the Helix Field Band at the beginning. And the original band was myself, Ron Watson, Bruce Arnold, Don Simmons, who was from Listowel. He was in my little high school band with me. Keith Zubrick and a guy named Rick Tremblay. And we had the band I was in Listowel, the little high school band named Homegrown. We played the COE, and through we weren't a very good band, but through the COE we met Ron and Bruce, and Bruce asked me. He said, "Look at we want you to form a band with us." So I said, "Well, I just happened to be moving down next year to work at Snyder's Meats." He says, "Great." So when I moved down to Kitchener to live with my grandmother, we immediately got together and we formed the Helix Field Band. And Donnie was still going to high school, but he was in too. He was the keyboard player. So we had two guys from Listowel, and then we had the four of us from the Kitchener area. And then Ron and Bruce fired Rick Tremblay pretty shortly after that. And we became a five-piece, and the rest is history.
And you guys were originally a 5 piece with keyboards.
That's true. And then
Yeah.
when Don Simmons left, by this time we'd gotten on the road and we were being managed by Bill Sipe. When Don decided to leave, we put an ad in the paper, and Paul Hackman answered the ad.
Okay, I want to come back to Paul's story because I want to take you back to the Battle of the Bands, because the Battle of the Bands was instrumental in all this too, right?
That's true. The Battle of Bands is something that used to be thrown by Sherwood Music. And ironically, my cousin, Larry Wajeka, was one of the owners with John, can't remember John's last name, that owned Sherwood Music. But they used to throw this thing called the Battle of the Bands at the COE. It was in a tent, and bands would come, and it was really neat. It was, get up, do a couple songs, and hopefully win. And we won it that year. And once we did that, Bruce got us some gigs through Dram, the booking agency in Waterloo. And we went out, we played a couple high schools, and we bombed everywhere we played. And and Bruce decided that he was going to get Dram out to look at us. The problem wasn't that we were bombing everywhere. The problem was that just didn't know what the band was about, which was a funny premise. But anyway, he made a deal with a guy named Rich Muldaisy, who was a friend of his.
Okay.
Was a dance convener at a local high school. And so they phoned up Bill Sipe and they said, look, if you go out and see Helix, and we were playing at the Twin Gables up in Lister, Ontario. So you go out and see Helix, and we'll hire Major Hooples to play at the high school, and you make a big, fat, juicy commission on the band. So Bill reluctantly agreed. He's saying to himself, why the hell am I going to go out and see this band? They bombed every gig I booked him at. But anyway, he dragged his ass all the way up to Listowel, and he saw the band. He just loved us, and he came to me. He says, "I think you got something," and pretty soon he was our manager. And once Bill was our manager, then we all quit our day jobs, and he put us on the road. One of our early gigs was being the actual band for Del Shannon, the Del Shannon,
Right.
and we played a week at the Coronet and a
So
week.
when Bill, I want to back up just a second. When Bill came to you, Brian, did he have experience as a manager or like a band manager? Did he have background in the music industry? What made you think he was the guy?
Well, he was an agent at Dram, but before that, he was in two bands. He was in a rock band called Poverty Train and a show band called the Great Rufus Road Machine. Now, for those of you that don't know, the difference between a rock band and a show band was this. Rock bands tended to play stuff like Cream and Jimi Hendrix, and the heavier stuff wore jeans and T-shirts, or sometimes they dress up like Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band. But basically, they were a rock band, and they usually played the B circuit, which was synonymous with the shitty bars. Shitty not as in how you went over or how good a time you had, but shitty from the aspect that they were dirty down and dirty rock bars, whereas the show bands, they played the A rooms, which were places like the Water Tower, the Crown Room at the Coronet. They were nice rooms. The band rooms were nice. It was a different level. You get what I'm saying?
Right.
So anyway, Bill had an experience in both those types of bands, and in a way, he made us a hybrid of those two. We became a rock show band, which was unheard of at that time. We moved around on stage. Bands didn't move around back then. I know that.
No, they just stood. They pretty much just stood still.
They ramrod straight at the microphone stand. We moved all over the place, especially me, because from the very first gig I ever played, I thought if I stop moving, I'm gonna choke. So I kept moving.
Right. Was it the nerves that kept you moving?
Pardon me?
Was it the nerves that kept you moving?
Yeah. And later on, it was a matter of ducking the ashtrays and beer bottles.
I think I was at one of those gigs, but it wasn't being thrown at you guys.
Well, I actually got knocked out one night in Tilsonburg at the Royal. I had a beer, but we used to have this disco sucks chair. We go on the count of three, we want everybody to stand up and yell disco sucks. We go 1, 2, 3, everybody jumped to their feet and yelled disco sucks. And a beer ball came flying from the back room and clocked me right in the side of the head, just as I turned my head. And down I went. Wasn't out very long, like maybe a second. Um, and never did find out who threw it, or they probably would have killed him.
Yeah, well, you're lucky it didn't kill you.
Well, they were rough audiences back then. I just did an interview with Frank Soda, and Frank Soda used to have the song where he wore the TV set in his head. And one night he was playing Barrymore's in Ottawa, and somebody put a beer ball through the screen of the TV, and they took that guy on the back alley, and they damn near kicked him to death.
Wow.
So, yeah, it was a two-way street sometimes.
Crazy stuff, man. Crazy stuff.
They were rough places.
Occupational hazard?
Well, you had to use your fists a lot of times, and not be afraid to in bars. And a lot of times, I would be right out the front of the stage, staring somebody right down, because if you showed fear, it was like they'd smell the blood in the water and start circling like sharks.
So were there people that came to your show that actually try to intimidate you sometimes?
Well, more so the case where you'd be playing somewhere and there'd be somebody out front and just start hassling you. Um,
Wow.
I had bikers, try to threaten me, and
Wow, different things to happen at different gigs. I don't know. I think I've experienced a couple of those myself at one point in time. Worst thing that happened was people trying to get up and dance with you on stage.
well, at the Coronet, when we first played there, we had to play in the pit. And that was downstairs in the basement where all the Saints Choice hung out. And it was a real blue collar bar, and everybody come in there because the drafts were cheap, come in after work. And I remember the stage was so small and there was a railing around the stage, so everybody could be inside the railing except, of course, me. So I'd be on the dance floor and be just packed, and I'd get all these old wino ladies grabbing my crotch and shit and molesting me, and dancing, yeah.
Dancing with they thought you wanted to dance. You didn't want to dance with them. You just wanted to do your thing.
We had a biker one time. We were out west, and he was down the dance floor dancing with this chick, and he took off his leg and put put the prosthetic up on the monitor and proceeded to hop around on one foot for a song.
Oh man, crazy. That is one crazy, crazy, crazy thing. Hey, so you guys got through the Battle of the Bands. Bill Sipe comes into the picture, becomes the manager for you guys, and then helps forge your musical direction. And then you guys lose your keyboard player around that time, right?
Lost a keyboard player. We started out playing around locally when we first got signed to Dram. And then they set us off to Northern Ontario. Northern Ontario was like the birth of fire. Horrible rooms, a lot of times freezing cold in the winter, steamy hot in the summer. Places like Trenton at the Sherwood Forest Inn, you'd bring your own bed and everything. Be like some muzzy mattress on the floor. All the walls be graffiti. Um, so pretty rough place. But we go up to Northern Ontario, and if you survived that, then they send you out east. But on our first trip up north, I think Bruce quit. He met a girl and he left the band, and Brian Durner came in, and then Donnie Simmons left, and he was replaced by Paul. And when Paul phoned up from an ad we put in the paper, and he said, "Look, you're not going to find a keyboard player." He says, "I was looking for a keyboard player for my band Whitehorse," and he said, "We couldn't find one." He said, "You're not going to find a keyboard player," and Bill thought, "Well, this guy's being kind of cheeky." But sure enough, we couldn't find a keyboard player. And then Paul came out, and we used to practice at Mrs. Baden's barn, or Mrs. Sipes' barn in Baden, rather, I meant to say. And it was the middle of winter, and of course, no heat or anything out there. I think we had uh, something we rented that blew fire out of it. But anyway, Paul came out. It was so cold, he was wearing gloves and trying to play his guitar. And we said to him, we said, "You're pretty good, but you need to play cleaner." He says, "I'm wearing gloves for God's sakes."
It was so cold out there.
It was so cold.
Crazy, crazy. So, so this is around what year, Brian? What year are we in now?
Well, we went on the road around 1976. We didn't get signed to Capitol EMI in '83, but in between those years, we, like I said, they'd put us out to Northern Ontario, and if you survived Northern Ontario, then they'd send you to the Maritimes. And if you survived the Maritimes, then they'd send you out to Western Canada. And Western Canada was different than Ontario or Eastern Canada from the perspective that the rooms were actually nice. We actually had TVs in our rooms that worked,
Oh, wow.
and washrooms in our rooms, like our own bathroom. We didn't have to go down the hall and share it with some wino that happened to be living a couple doors down.
And what was the difference back then when you guys were playing those circuits? What was the difference back then in terms of the types of crowds that you played to? Were they hungrier for music in one place than another?
Well, you have to remember something. Back in that time period of history, there was no cell phones, there was no computers.
Right,
TV went off air at, like, maybe 1 o'clock in the morning. Um, there was no computer games. The closest you came to that was shooting pool or playing pinball.
right,
So essentially, no entertainment. Plus the fact that it was a promiscuous time period, because the worst you could get would be crabs or VD or gonorrhea or something. In other words, you weren't going to die. That all changed in the early '90s, so that affected the bar scene then too. But back
right.
then, that's where you'd go to meet the opposite sex. You knew people at the bar that you worked with or went to school with. Sometimes
Yep.
you meet your future wife in the bar. The bar was the social center of a lot of towns. People would show up on Monday night and check out the band, and then word would spread. Either you were good or you sucked. And if you were good, people would drift out during the week, have one beer, check you out, and then Thursday it started to pick up, and Friday be packed. And that's the way it went.
And how many nights would you play per gig?
Well, you would play 6 nights a week, and then sometimes the agency would even get you playing Sundays. I know for Helix, we played Bingham Park, we played Taxandria Hall down in Arcona. I knew that's why everybody was losing their voice too, by the way, because they were just
Right.
singing too much. And smoky bars, everybody smoked.
That's right.
In Tilsonburg at the Royal Hotel down there, it was illegal not to smoke.
Imagine that.
And as I said in my first book, Give Me an R, we partied with the locals, we ate with the locals, went to barbecues with the locals, and a lot of times we slept with the locals.
and
So,
so
but that's important. I know we're laughing now, but when we got signed to Capitol Records in 1983, one of the first questions they asked us was, "Do you have a following?" And we had a following right across the country, and I think that's why Helix has survived until today, because we have such deep roots across the country, from actually meeting people face to face and commingling with them, and hanging out with them.
you guys
Nowadays,
did, you guys were doing pretty well even before you got signed with Capitol, because I can remember going to your shows and they'd be packed.
well, we had two independent albums out before we got signed to Capitol Records,
That's right.
which was another unheard of thing. I wanted to do original music, and I remember one day, I don't know where we were sitting in grass somewhere having a band meeting, and we decided we were going to make an album. So we went out and borrowed money from Brent's parents, my parents, my grandmother, Bill's parents, and I think the first album cost $26,000. It was called Breaking Loose. We recorded it at Springfield Sound down by London, Ontario, a little place called Springfield. It was a renovated schoolhouse owned by Bob Luth and Brian Ferryman, who went on to manage Michelle Wright. And we did our first album, and it came out, and we had a huge hit off that album in the state of Texas, a song called You're a Woman Now that was written by Paul. And the guy giving us the airplay was Joe Anthony from Kiss K-Mac out of San Antonio. And Joe Anthony, to this day, was known as the godfather of rock and roll. He broke black acts when it wasn't fashionable to play black music in the United States, and then he played metal music when it wasn't fashionable to play that type of music on the radio. So he was a real pioneer. And the airplay we got off that song led to our first ever tour of the States. And we went down, we played Helotes, which is just outside of San Antonio. And we played with Y&T yesterday and today at Dave Menenchetti. So I have a long relationship with Dave Menenchetti too. And then we played Houston and Dallas at I don't know if they were both called the Bijou. And we played Amarillo College for a guy named Chris Johnson. And it was kind of surreal. We got there, and of course, Chris had the college radio station on the car as he was driving us around. It was just Helix song after Helix song after Helix song. And I have that entire show on video.
And that radio play down in Texas was big for you because it helped you blow up in Texas too, didn't it?
That's right. We developed a following down there and we're still strong in Texas.
Yeah, that's pretty wild. Somebody that far away picked up your music and started playing it, and next thing you know, a whole bunch of locals snap onto it and go, "Wow, we really like these guys."
Well, we felt like stars because back then it was unheard of to even play the United States. So if you could
Right.
play the United States, you were happening. And when we came back on that little mini tour, people just treated us differently. And that's one of the reasons I still continue to put out music nowadays, because when you're still continuing to put out new music, it doesn't matter if there's only 10 people out there that buy it. The bottom line is people regard you differently. They look at you as a going concern, let's say, because you're still in the game. After all, you can't win the lottery by not buying the lottery ticket.
That's true. That's true. And the way we talk about things here in terms of organic growth is, typically things happen one person at a time. They like what you're doing, they tell somebody else who tells somebody else, right?
Yes, and the music business is such that you never know when something weird's going to happen to just rejuvenate your career. In the early '90s, for us, it was the Trailer Park Boys. That association with that show got us a tour out in Western Canada with the boys and Swollen Members, 10 dates. They were all packed shows. Then I was in the movie Countdown to Liquor Day with Alex Lifeson. So you can't see around corners, but if you just keep going forward, a lot of times God will take care of you, and things will work out all right. After all, I have been here almost 50 years now.
That's great.
And like I said, I can't see around corners. I just keep moving forward, and I do what I love. And I hope that my taste isn't that far off. If I like something, there's somebody out there who love it too.
Right. How
And
long before your first album, which incidentally was produced in 1974?
the
How
first album was done in 1979,
Sorry, it's 1979.
yeah,
You guys were officially formed in what year? As Helix?
1974.
1974. And were you guys still doing
So we spent 6 years in the bars
and
before
you got
we put out a record.
and you guys were doing stuff for Del Shannon back in the early days too, right?
Well, like I said, back then Dram used to get young green bands to be the bands when the big artists came down, like Freddie Cannon, Tina Turner, Little Richard, Chuck Berry, and Del Shannon. And we were chosen to be Del Shannon's band. Well, we hadn't even heard of Del Shannon. We had no idea who he was. So Bill sent us down to Sam the Record Man, which was owned by Gil Zubrick, Bert's our bass player's brother. And we picked up the best of Del Shannon. We're looking at the back, and he's sitting there with the Beatles and Tom Petty and Jeff Lynne and people like that. And we're going, wow, you know. And the record company, or sorry, the agency rather, came out to check on us that we were learning the songs properly over the next 6 months, I think. And then they sent me to Toronto. The fateful day arrived. We were doing 2 weeks with Del Shannon, one at the Coronet and Kitchener at the Crown Room. And the second week we were at the Jockey Club in Hamilton, Ontario. Well, they sent me to Toronto to pick up Del at the airport. So I drove up in my $25 Ford Galaxy with the Bondo red fenders on and snow tires on in the middle of summer. And I picked up Del, and he didn't say anything. He got in the car. We're going down the 401. I'm doing about 80 miles an hour, and I got snow tires on, like I said, in the middle of August. And the car is just shaking, this great big old V8 Galaxy. And Del goes, look at it, if you slow down, drive the speed limit, I'll buy you a steak supper. So the quickest way to a musician's heart is, of course, through their stomach. And so we stopped, and I slowed down. But we get to the Coronet, and the band's up in the Crown Room, and they're running over the stuff, and everybody's just like very nervous. We don't want to mess up, and we're all just young musicians. Well, Del Shannon comes in, he starts changing the keys of songs, and he's
Oh
throwing
no.
in like stuff, just showmanship stuff, and he wants us to do. And anyway, which really freaked us out. So we go up to the rooms after the show, and Brent at the time was a real punk, and Brent had quit smoking cigarettes. So instead of smoking cigarettes, he used to smoke hash oil. And he smoked so much hash oil, he used to carry around a butane torch and butter knives. And anyway, Del Shannon walked in the room, and there's Del, and Brent's doing these knife tokes. And Del goes, "What are you doing?" And Brent goes, "Here, try it." He goes like this. And Del goes, "What, are you trying to burn me or something?" And so Brent goes, "No, no, no, we're smoking hash oil. That's the way you do it, da, da, da." So Del goes, and he does like about 10 tokes. And I'm looking on, and I'm thinking, I don't think this is a good thing to be doing. Like, we're going on stage pretty soon, right? And, I'm not saying anything. And Del, too, just drank constantly. He's, and so anyway, the way we used to come on with Del was he had this kind of Vegas-y type of thing. He'd be going da 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 da, and there'd be like we'd be playing up on stage, not me, but the guys would be, and there was a Fender twin reverb up there, and Del would walk out and he'd plug in and he'd actually tune to the band as he was playing, and then he'd stop and he'd go, "Once I had a pretty girl, her name it doesn't matter. She ran away with another guy, and now she's getting fatter." And he'd go into Hats Off to Larry. Well, we go, the Coronet used to have this cheesy uh, aluminum foil, gold foil at the back of the stage, and red carpet. And the stage was, I don't know, about maybe 2.5 feet high. And it was packed that night because Del Shannon was a big name. Del Shannon, the Beatles backed up Del Shannon, Rolling Stones backed up Del Shannon.
Sure. Yeah.
And it's just packed. It's just crammed in there like sardines in the Crown Room. And the band's playing. Out walks Del, and he's waving to the crowd like this, right? And he walked right off the end of the stage, and he did what I call a face plant on the front table. He wiped out the table. Glasses go flying left and right. Well, the bouncers grab him, and they like heave ho him up back onto the stage. He starts singing. He loses his voice. He goes, "One thing," right? And then he was struggling for the rest of the set because the oil must have just done in his throat. And then for the next 2 weeks, it was crazy. I remember on the Friday night, Kenny Hollis from Copper Penny showed up, and they drank all night long. They didn't go to bed, and he played the next night. By the time we got to the Jockey Club in Hamilton, which it was a real mafia club back in the day, and the owner showed up, and he's got this nice, expensive suit on. Oh, you disappeared there on me, Ken.
That's okay. You're telling the story, so I want everybody
Okay,
to see
well,
you tell
anyway,
the story.
he shows up in this very expensive suit with the carnation and the lapel, and he's going, "Where's Mr. Shannon?" And I go, "Over there in the corner, passed out. You know, the guy snoring over there in the corner." But I tell you, Dell was a great guy. It was a real honor to actually play with him. He stood up for us. When we first went in, Kenny Haig, our little English sound man, they weren't going to let him in because he was wearing a T-shirt and jeans. And Dell said, "Look, this is my sound man. You let him in or I'm not playing." And then another time we were up on stage and, we were a green, heavy rock band playing with Del Shannon. So people were obviously there to see Del Shannon. And the crowd we'd go on and play a set first. And then Del would come on and they were hassling us, the audience. And Del came on right on stage and goes, "Look at," he said, "this is my band. You make fun of them, you make fun of me." And it was like quiet. And he stood up for us, Del
It
Shannon.
called him out.
And when I took Del to the airport, here's another funny end of the story. So at the end of 2 weeks, I had to take Del back to Toronto to catch his flight at Pearson. But we were staying overnight at my sister's place in Toronto, and they were going somewhere on holidays, I think to Thunder Bay, and they said you could use the townhouse. So Dell took one room and I took the other room. Well, the next morning, he's getting ready to go to the airport, and he says, "I got a present for you." And he pulled out this. It was like a safe condom, and it was in like this oily stuff that really stunk. And he goes, "Here, this so you don't get your girlfriend pregnant." Right? And and then he took I think a taxi or something to the airport. I didn't drive him to the airport, but I was over at my sister's. My mother just passed away about a month ago, and I was over at my sister's place. She says, "Oh," she says, "have you ever seen this?" And it was a note that Dell left in the townhouse, and it was thanking you for letting her use the bed. And there was this little
Right.
note he left in the bed, and he'd saved it all these years. So I took a picture of it.
Crazy story. So you guys were backing up Del Shannon, and is this while Helix was playing out?
Yeah, we were his band. We weren't actually backing up the Del Shannon band. We were his band.
Right. And were you guys also playing out at that time as the band Helix as well?
Yep. Uh,
That was in that time you were also playing the bar circuit.
yes, we'd been playing the bar circuit. We played places like the Sebring Villa outside of Stratford, the Rideout Hotel in London. We played the John's. No, sorry, that was before that. Yeah, actually, we did play the John Scott out in St. Thomas.
That's right. Now, did you play any of those bars while you still had the keyboard player? Or is this all after Paul joined the band?
No, this is with Donnie in the band.
Okay.
We played the
And
Elm in Clinton. We played the Silver Dollar Lounge down in Haspler.
so this is all around Ontario, Canada at this point in time.
Well, pretty close to Kitchener. We didn't,
You
I
didn't go
think we
too
went
far.
up north. We did a few dates up north. We played Arnprior. We played the Elms Hotel in Deep River. We played Kapuskasing Inn. We played Timmins at the Travel House, Smooth Rock Falls.
So a lot of different clubs over that period of time, as well as doing the shows with Del Shannon, and then a little while down the road, you guys, your keyboard player leaves the band. You find Paul, who's looking for a keyboard player, and says, "Hey, you're never going to find another keyboard player."
That's right.
And he comes over from the band Whitehorse and joins you guys.
That's right. And our first gig was at the John Scott's. That's why I had to think about that. And Paul was from St. Thomas. He used to call it Little Chicago.
Right.
They used to do mescaline, go lay on their backs on top of the water tower and look at the sky, told me. Um, and Paul changed the course of the history of the band, as did Bill Sipe, as did Brent
Yeah.
Kern.
Now everybody had everybody that came along changed and had changed the influence of the band and the musical direction of the band.
That's right. We've had, I think, almost 42 members over the years, but the core membership of the band, which was myself, Brent, Fritz, um, Daryl, and who am I leaving out here? Paul. We were together from about 1976 to almost 1990.
Right. You guys were together. You had quite a run for that period of time too. You guys played a lot of places.
We did, and we had a good time. We played right across the country. Um, like I said, you'd start off playing Northern Ontario. So the usual Northern Ontario run, we go to the first gig would be in North Bay, and then we maybe jump to the Brockdan and Sudbury, and then Timmins, and then Kappas Casing, and then maybe come home. And
So
then
you guys beg, borrow, and steal now. You're heading into like 1978, 79. You're beg, borrowing, and stealing to go and make your first album.
essentially, we put together a lot of the songs while we were out on the East Coast on our first maritime tour ever. And we started off that tour, I think we played Lennoxville in Quebec at the university. And then the first place we actually played in the Maritimes was the Gloucester Hotel in Bathurst, or we used to call it Bathurst, New Brunswick, because that's the way, because everybody's French, so it's Bathurst.
Right.
But years later, I became friends with Brian Kenny, who was the Minister of Education under the Sean Graham government out there. And his family actually owned that hotel. And I told him, oh, yeah, that was the first place we ever played.
Wow.
And then we played all through the Maritimes, mostly universities, to tell you the truth. We played UPI, University of Prince Edward Island at the Barn, which was a weird gig because you were up on the second floor and playing over a railing to the people down below on the first floor. We played St. Xavier's and St. Mary's in Halifax. We played Zapata's, which was a club up on by Citadel Hill. I
Right.
remember we came in the week before, and Richie Oakley was playing there, and he came down to the table and he says, "Oh, you have to excuse me, I'm really screwed up on magic mushrooms right now." Uh,
I got to take you out for a couple of shout outs here. We got a quick shout out. It says, "Hey Vollmer from Caleb Duck."
how you doing there, Duck Man?
And
Caleb
Kyle
was a good
Alt.
guy. I'll tell you, Caleb was in the band for a little over 10 years, and he was so young when he joined the band that he didn't even. He was told he used to play in speed metal, and we had to show him what a boogie was for Animal House. But solid player, real talent, and just so fun to play with him.
We got another thanks from Kyle Alt, who says, "This is great, Ken. Thanks for sharing your life experience, Brian."
You're welcome.
So we're moving up to your first LP that you guys made, and you were already touring some of those songs that went on that first album. You said it cost how much money to make that album?
$26,000.
$26,000 to make your first album, and you guys made it on your own label.
We made our own label, H&S Records, which stood for Helix and Sipe. It was produced by Bob Morton, who had produced Harmonium in Quebec, which was a platinum selling act back then, although it wasn't really known outside the province of Quebec. Lydia Taylor sang on that album. Lydia Taylor won a Juno, I think, Female of the Year. Doug Vardy was on that album. What else? It was mastered by George Marino at Sterling Sound in New York City.
Yeah,
And
there's a
Paul,
whole lot of history behind that album. So let's go back to the recording process, first of all. So you recorded the album in the Springfield Sound, which is the old school in Springfield.
yes,
We all knew about that when we were kids. I remember when you guys were recording there because I hung out with Paul's younger brother Mike, and I remember him telling me about you guys being in the studio recording there.
Hmm. Yeah,
Yeah, pretty cool.
I have Super 8 film from back then.
Oh, see, all these ideas that we have with all your Super 8 movies. We could make some real cool videos, dude, of some of those songs you recorded in the studio in that time, right?
I could have like a 10-season show.
No shit. We could make a ton of episodes of just all your Super 8 movies and put them to Helix tracks.
Well, not only do I have Helix, but I actually have my grandfather's home movies from back in the day too. There's one that's pretty interesting. Even back then, when I was very young, I wanted to do a video, and my grandfather had this record called Irving. Have you ever heard it? And
Never
the
heard.
and the other side was the whole world's Jewish,
Okay.
and it went. It was a comedy record, but it went. Big Fat Irving, the 142nd fast gun in the West, Irving, Irving. And I wanted to do this video, right? But I had like a home movie camera, my grandfather's. So I basically bullied my sister and brother in being in it. And then halfway through it, they went, "Oh, we ain't doing this no more." And I got all upset. And I remember I cried. I actually cried. My grandfather felt bad for me, right? But I still got that footage that I tried to make this video, right? I had it all in my head, but kind of from my head, the film was another thing entirely.
Yeah, and of course editing movie film back in the days was a bit of an art, wasn't it?
Oh, geez, you had to put it in this little machine and chop it off and then put the splice on. And hopefully the splice didn't get caught as it was going through the projector. And
That's right. Crazy, 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 crazy time. So you've been filming um stuff with the band since the beginning.
I have. I'm not a big technical guy. Brent's more, Brent's a technical guy. Brent is right on top of the cutting edge of everything that's happening out there. And that's why I get Brent to do our videos. But when it comes like the home movie stuff, I think I got a good eye for editing things that people can get a chuckle out of it when they see it. A lot of my stuff, though, is completely uncensored. So I can't really release it to general audiences. I used to put together my films for the annual band Christmas supper, and we'd sit around afterwards and we watch kind of like a 30-minute version of the year. And when you're looking over the year, you're just taking the very funniest bits. Everybody be just splitting a gut.
Geez, you know what? Maybe I'm hearing like exclusive content that we could put up on the website, and people would have to pay to get to it, and it'd probably be worth their while to see all this uncensored stuff.
Yeah, the only problem is I don't want to get sued either.
Because you got some really cool footage of a ton of different people over the years that partook in various things you guys did.
I got Robin Williams on my home movies. I have Cozy Powell, who isn't alive anymore, with Cozy Powell, Neil Murray, and David Coverdale. I have Ken Hensley and Ricky Medlock. Ken Hensley was a keyboard player for Uriah Heep, and Ricky Medlock now is he was in Blackfoot, but now he's in Leonard Skinner. He just played the other night, by the way, as a benefit for Southern Florida.
You see what
So,
Caleb says about your home videos? He says
lot,
your home videos are very amusing. Lots of nudity. Ha ha ha.
yeah, like his naked ass.
I recall coming across some band photos of you guys all naked somewhere out west. We'll have to talk about that
No, it
one
wasn't
night.
out west. You're probably referring to the Oktoberfest shot we did. And that was done during Kitchener, and that was done the morning after Rock U, and we were hurt. We were hurting units, and we had to stay overnight in our cars at the London Brickyards, and go to the lawyer in the morning. I think it was Ed Glennard was the lawyer in Toronto. And then we had to go back to Kitchener. We did this photo session because we were from Kitchener, which is the second biggest Oktoberfest in the world.
Right,
Uh,
for sure.
we were doing a picture that signified that for a guy named David Munns, or Munsey, who worked for Capitol Records, and he was from the EMI or Capitol from over in England, and he was responsible for talking Dean Cameron from the Canadian part of the company to assign us, because he was on the cutting edge of what was happening over there with groups like Judas Priest and Iron Maiden.
Right.
He saw the same potential in Helix.
Yeah, yeah, definitely, definitely. You guys were like right in that whole era of all those heavy metal bands, right?
We were. And in Canada, we were probably they talk about other bands in Canada, but Helix was really the only international band that was selling records and that ended up getting a major. We were never signed to the Canadian label, by the way. We were signed to the American label out of Los Angeles, and we spent a lot of time down there during the '80s hanging around the tower. In
I
fact,
remember.
the release album or the release of Wild in the Streets was on Sunset and Vine right in front of the Capitol Towers.
Right. And that was later on down the road. And first album we were talking about is Breaking Loose. That was
Yeah.
your first album into the world of rock and roll and metal music. It was you guys did that all yourself, all the promo on that. You guys had a newsletter and all kinds of cool stuff that you used to market that.
The newsletter was called the Heliograph, and I used to love putting that together. Once again, these are all things I did when I was a kid. I used to write stories for myself. I had this little scribbler at home, and I used to write stories that only I'd read, or maybe I'd read them for my grandparents or something, right? Which is like an odd thing for a child to do. But
Right.
I took pictures, and when I don't know who came up with the actual idea of the newsletter, but I used to spend so much time putting it together, and I just love doing it. I still have all those old newsletters in my scrapbooks too, and they've helped me pin down locations and dates, and some things I even forgot about. We were going to change the Helix name at one point, and we actually had a contest in one of the heliographs. I forget what the prize was, like $20 or something, and it never happened. I don't know why. We ended up keeping the name.
That's a cool thing about rock and rollers like yourself, Brian, that there's always other art forms that appeal to them as well. Like you're a scrapbooker as well.
Well, I'm putting all this together in the scrapbook because if I don't label everything, I don't think anybody will know who the pictures are or what its significance has.
Right. And you've already have some history memorabilia that it now sits in a university in Ontario, right?
Yes, and I have to thank Greg Godovich for that. What happened was I was cleaning out the basement at Planet Helix when we decided to sell that place, and I had all these 2-inch tapes, and I thought, what am I going to do with these? I don't have an Ampeg, the old Ampeg machine, 2-inch machine, and even if I did, most of them get oxidized over the years, so you have to thermally bake them at a cost of about $200 a reel, and there was like 48 of the damn things, right? I thought, I'm never going to do this. Most of the music is out there already anyway. Why would I? I don't plan on doing remixes forever. And so I actually put them out on the curb in the rain. And I I thought, well, maybe I'll put the advertisement on Facebook, say whoever wants some of these, give me $30 each, whatever, right? So about a half hour later, Greg Godovich phoned me. He says, "What the hell do you think you're doing?" He says, "Are you crazy?" He said, "Those tapes are worth money." He says, "The University of Toronto, if you donate them to the music department or whatever it is, they'll give you a big tax deduction for them." He says, "People like Randy Bachman have already given stuff, and I don't know who else, a lot of other artists." So I thought, okay, so I went and dragged everything back in the house, and And the University of Toronto came down one day and they loaded up a van full of everything that was in the closet in my basement, and off it went to Toronto. And a couple of years later, I ended up getting a tax deduction. So
That's a cool story, and we're at the top of the hour now, and we're gonna maybe go for another 7 or 8 minutes, and then we're gonna have Brian back on again. We're gonna do another one of these segments. We're probably gonna do several of them because we're like only really up to about 1979, and we're gonna stay around there for a little bit yet because there's
well,
still
I
more
picked a lot of
stories.
stuff too.
Yeah, there's a lot of stories that we're going to come back to as well, and themes that we jumped on during the course of the conversation here. Um, so you guys put out this first album. You guys did the Helix newsletter, and you did all kinds of marketing yourselves, and you guys sold albums at your own gigs.
Well, we made such little money that I used it to make more money to myself so I could survive. And I was always a salesman, even when I lived on the farm. I used to sell Christmas cards. Do you know how hard it is to sell Christmas cards when you live in the middle of nowhere? Like, I go to one farmhouse, be attacked by three different dogs, and then I drive like 3 miles down the road to the next place where I get attacked by another three set of dogs, right? So I was a salesman. I like selling stuff. And initially, I used to sell T-shirts. We had raunch and roll T-shirts that we sold between the sets, and I'd make more money, probably double what I was making on selling shirts than I did for my actual pay. And then when the album came out, we used to divide the audience up, and initially it was Paul selling it. Well, everybody was selling the band, but everybody kind of gave up except me. And I would go out there, and Sype used to have a deal with us. I can't remember exactly what it was, but it was something like you had to sell the albums for $2 a piece, but something like if you sold like three or something, you got credit for four. I can't remember what it was now. So, or if you got the 25, then you got double the money or something. So I'd make all sorts of deals with people in the audience so I get to 25. But we moved thousands of albums like that, and I think we were at Treble Clef distributing out of the States or out of Ottawa or someplace like that, and that all helped us to eventually get our deal with Capitol Records because once again we had that foundation. And not only that, but having our own music out there allowed us to get our foot in the door with radio stations, with magazines like Kerrang and Sounds in England. We got on the second album, we got a lot of press in Kerrang with Paul Suter and in Sounds magazine with Mark Putterford. So that helped us over in that territory as well.
Yeah, back in the day, the only way to get your music heard out there was to get it out on vinyl or get it out on some sort of medium that it could be played somewhere so people would know who you were.
Yes, as much as the internet gets music out all over the world nowadays, I think it's much more difficult for musicians to stand out in the crowd. I think we lived through the golden era of the music business, really, because if you just went out there and pounded away, and we were all German squareheads in this band,
That's
so
right.
we had that work ethic, and we just go out there and we used Rush as a model because Rush used to have these suburban legend rumors where they go out for 73 days straight. And we go, we want to be like that because they broke. And it was just through sheer hard work. And that's what we were all about. We outworked everybody else.
And you guys were playing, like just like Rush, you guys played high schools before you were old enough to play in bars.
Well, that's not quite true because when we got together, we were all of age.
Oh, so you guys were all of age to be able to play in bars at that point in time.
Yeah, when we first formed, everybody was 18.
But your early days of playing, did play in high schools?
Yes, that's when I was in high school. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, pretty cool. Pretty cool history, Brian. I want to. I think I don't think there's any particular questions here. Lots of people saying hi. Cindy Weichman says hi.
Hi, Cindy.
Um, and you've known Cindy for many, many years.
Yeah, Cindy's got a great voice.
Yes, yes.
Yeah,
I keep
very good.
I keep telling her and
And her
Reiner.
husband, Reiner's a great guitar player too.
I keep telling her and Reiner that I want to put some of their music up on our website because I love their music.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Chaos, is that what you're talking about? Or you're talking about the newest projects?
Well, all their stuff they've done, they've always done really terrific music. So,
We
I'd like to,
toured right around Newfoundland back in the day when they had their own band called Chaos.
right. I'm sure, and I know that they've recorded lots of stuff off and on over the years too, right?
Yes.
Yeah,
They used to have a recording studio in the basement of their house.
that's
I
right. I'm sure you recorded there, no doubt about that. So when we have you back on the show, I think we're gonna pick up where we left off and kind of talk about that first album a little bit, your early years of touring, and the years leading up to your signing with Capitol Records. That was your first big, what most people would consider your first big mainstream break.
Yes, and it was, but it all was connected, and all, like I said, it led and it helped to the momentum. Uh, we were riding, every time we put out an album, we were getting a little bit bigger, a little bit bigger. On the first Breaking Loose album, it, as I said, became a hit in Texas and got us our foot in the door in the United States. And then the second album was actually a number one import on Bullet Records in the UK, which got us into those heavy, like people back then followed magazines, and in Canada it was the Music Express, and in the UK it was Sounds magazine and Kerrang magazine.
My first favorite song off that album, I remember hearing it when it first came out, was Billy Oxygen.
Yeah, I like to put that song back into the set. Brent and Paul wrote that song.
Right. It's a peppy number, isn't it?
That was a big, should I say, showstopper when we used to play it back in the day. And Brian Durner played drums on that track, and he was like 18. He's just an amazing drummer. Um, had some great stuff in that song as well.
Yeah. And some night we got like maybe on one of the shows we should talk a little bit about some of the tracks on that album because the tracks on that album are a diverse type of track from track to track because you got Billy Oxygen, this like this sort of peppy two-step kind of number, and then you've got then you go to the end of the album and it sounds more like almost a King Crimson feel.
Well, we were searching for a sound at that point, and we were just beginning as writers. So, and you have to understand back then too, people. I don't think bands were as slotted as they are nowadays. Like back then, when we were in the bars, we played everything from the Bay City Rollers to Ted Nugent and Deep Purple. So uh, that always comes through in your own original music. Whereas
Right.
today, you'll see like a Metallica band, and everything they write sounds like Metallica, and so on.
Yeah, you listen to those first few albums and they all sound so much different in so many different ways.
Very eclectic.
Oh, and you can and I can hear when I sit back and listen to those tunes, I can hear different musical influences in those songs.
Uh-huh, for sure.
Yeah. So as we parting words, Brian, for musicians starting
Right,
up
yeah,
nowadays.
it's nice talking with you, Ken. You're doing a great job helping to promote the new Helix music and the old
That's right.
Helix music, and we got lots of more stuff to put up there. Uh,
And you're
I'm
getting a
putting
fire
out a
under those boys to write a new
special.
album.
I'm putting out a Christmas special. Can I talk about this?
Yeah, talk about the Christmas special.
Oh, well, I have a T-shirt coming out. It's just the Helix logo with Rock You in the back, black and white shirt. Simple shirt, but I dropped the price to like $19.99 plus shipping. It's a good price. And also three color Rock You shirts. I think they're going for $24.99, which is it's down considerably too. I also have a thing I'm putting together with Jay Panasico, and a guy named, I'm going to say Matthew, I could be wrong on this, from out in Dorchester, but it's a computerized image of myself. And I'm doing the devil's horns, and I got my mouth open, and we're putting it on a bass, and there's going to be recording inside, and it's going to say, "Give me an ROCK, what you got? Rock, what you gonna do? Rock you." And then there's going to be a message going to, and this is Brian Vollmer, and I approve this message.
Nice.
And I'm going to hand paint each one personally. They're all going to be different, and they're going to be numbered. And that's going to be sometime in the new year. So we're putting that together. We have little buttons coming that light up, and so we always have new merchandise. Over the years, we've had everything from little flashlights to coffee cups. I think they're real
And,
collector's item though, especially Canadian rock and roll collector
and where
item.
can people get all this stuff, Brian? Can they buy it directly off your website at planethelix.com?
Yeah, Merch Emotion is our merchandising company, and they kind of handle it for us on the website.
Right on. So, and you and I talked about that little statue, and I told you I want one of them suckers, and I'll pay the going price for it because I love collecting stuff. You got to, when you come to my studio, you'll understand the whole collection thing.
Well, I've collected a lot of stuff over my life as well.
Oh, I've been down in your basement, man. You collect a lot of stuff.
Oh, I used to have two Dimebag Darrell ukuleles signed by Steve Earle, who's one of my all-time favorite lyricists of all time. I have tons of stuff signed by the Trailer Park Boys and Alex Lifeson.
I'm telling you, it's been a blast talking to you tonight, and we're going to continue on where we left off. We're going to when we're going to do this again. When are we going to do this again? In a couple of weeks' time? You want to do it twice a month, or do you want to do it once a month?
We can do it once a month. How about that? I'm so busy. Like I know that sounds strange because like I'm 67 years old now, but you think it'd be slowing down, especially being in Florida. I'd be like laying by the pool, but it never stops.
There's no rest for the wicked.
I'm putting together a vinyl album right now that we've been working on for a couple of years. Well, it's actually two songs I wrote with Mark Ribler back in the early '90s, and we're taking songs from the Business Doing Pleasure album and a couple that I wrote with Sean, and we're putting an album out. But it's a long process, especially now. Vinyl pressing is like 8 months behind. So
that vinyl pressing, and we'll also be doing a digital release of those tunes as well, right?
Of it, so that's happening. I got this new merchandise happening, and we have a date coming up January the 18th in Key West down here. That's with Steve Adler of Guns N' Roses and Honeymoon Suite. And then we'll have dates all across Canada in the summer. And then in September, we're going to be in Helsinki, I think September 1st. And 2 days later, we're going to be in Hamburg, Germany at, I think it's called Indoor Summer Festival.
You better give Jimmy Buffett a call and tell him to get his ass out to your show. Hey?
Jimmy Buffett. Well, there's lots of bands down here in the great state of Florida.
No doubt about that.
My favorite new band, Blackberry Smoke. And
those guys know how to rock, don't they?
I love that band. And Charlie Starr is a star. Great front man. Once again, one of my favorite lyricists. I told him when I saw him when they played in London at the music hall, I said, I put you up there with Steve Earle. And anyway.
He's a humble dude. Listen, we're gonna sign off for now. Brian, it's been a pleasure having you on the show. We're gonna see you again next month. We'll figure out the date for that. We'll put the advertisement out again, everybody. So stay tuned for Chapter 2 of Brian Vollmer's journey into the world of music.
Can I say my standard goodbye?
Say what?
Can I say my standard goodbye?
You can say your standard goodbye.
Okay. This is Brian Vollmer. Don't be square. I'll see you around. Catch you on the flip side. Whoosh.
Vaudeville style. Awesome. Thanks, Brian, for joining me. Stay on. I'll talk to you right after the show.